Hello, everybody. Back with Patty Reed's Doll, Chapter 3. From Springfield to Independence. Next morning, the lowing of the cattle and the shouts of the men woke the children at sunrise. Eliza, in her calico apron, was already getting breakfast, and the smell of bacon and Johnny cake made them hurry to dress and be out in the fresh April daylight. "Patty, dear, take your little brothers out and wash their faces." Mrs. Reed was buttoning the little boys' shoes as they wriggled around among the quilts. "All right, Mother." Patty tied her apron strings and slipped me out from under her pillow and into our pocket. With the children's faces scrubbed and shining, the wash basin sat on the tailboard of one of the other wagons, and their hair all neatly combed, the family was ready for breakfast. Puss and her father had returned from feeding the horses, and the men from their morning chores. Patty took Grandma's breakfast into her first, and then sat down on a camp stool outside to eat her own. The grass was still wet with dew, and I noticed everyone shivered now and then in the crisp morning air. When the dishes had been washed and packed away, and the patchwork quilts spread neatly over the beds, Patty asked if we could sit on the box with Milt for a ways. Her mother gave her permission, and Milt boosted us up over the high front wheels to the seat beside him. From this perch we looked down the line on last-minute preparations. Men were rounding up the cattle, and women were rounding up the children. Grease was being put on the wheel hubs, and oxen were being yoked. The big animals, frisky after their night's rest, tossed their heads and clanked their chains, trying to throw off the heavy yokes. It wasn't long before they were ready, the drivers on their boxes with whips in hand, the women and children in the wagons, and Puss and Mr. Reed at the head of the line on Clockus and Billy. "Catch up, catch up!" the order rang out, and the wagons began to roll. Here is a picture of the wagon trail or train with everybody following each other. Day after day, for almost a month, we plodded down the muddy roads of Illinois, past farmhouses where dogs ran out to bark, and people waved to us as we rode by. Cherry and crabapple and wild plum blossoms reminded Grandma of Kentucky Springs, and there were strawberry runners and winding grapevines in the fields where we camped at night. The wagon tops stayed white in the blue, rain-washed April air, but underfoot the mud was thick and sticky. Grandma said she felt better every day. A good case of Western fever was just what these old bones needed, she told Patty. "What's Western fever, Grandma?" I was glad Patty asked, because I was wondering too, how one sickness could help her get well from another one. "Well, child, it's a powerful urge to go a-pioneering. That's what it is. And now that I'm doing just that, I am better already." Grandma certainly was as pert as ever. With her piece bag always at hand, she kept her fingers busy piecing quilt blocks, while Patty sat beside her making a dress for me. I thanked my lucky stars that I was just the little country cousin and could knock about with Patty. The other dolls were carefully packed away in the cupboard under the seats, lest their fragile faces and beautiful dresses should be damaged by the roughness of the trip, while here I was out in full view of the world and able to take in everything. When it rained and things were dull for Tommy and Jimmy, we all played hide the thimble. The palace car was too small to really hide it, so we just pretended, and then the others guessed. That way Grandma could play too without ever getting up from bed. Sometimes Patty took me over to the Donner wagons, and all the little girls played with their dolls. Mrs. Donner was an artist, and she let us look at her sketchbook when she had pressed the flowers we found along the way and had drawn pretty pictures of them. She told us that's what it meant to botanize. On dry nights, we had a campfire and sat around it visiting until bedtime. Mr. Reed wrote down the record of each day's progress in a little book he kept in his vest pocket. and from that he could tell how far we were along the way. It was the evening of May 10th, as I remember, that he told us, "Tomorrow we'll be camping at the outskirts of Independence." "Independence? Is that the last town on the frontier, isn't it, Papa?" asked Puss. "Yes, and I've been thinking I'd see about arranging for 2 or 3 more wagon loads of provisions when we get there. It will be better to have too much than too little when we are out on the prairie. California is a mighty long ways away. I'd like to buy some sunbonnets for the girls and myself if we have a chance." "The ones we brought won't be much protection, I'm afraid," said Mrs. Reed. The clouds of small buzzing wings that hovered over us soon drove all the folks back to the wagons for the night. "Dolly, you are lucky that your face is made of wood and the pesky skeeters can't bite you," said Patty, as the hand that held me came up with a jerk to drive one of the whirring insects away from her ear. That is the end of chapter 3, and then this here is the last page. So check back tomorrow and we will read chapter 4.